Uh, Chief, can you hear me?
Yes. Good
How are
afternoon,
you?
Counselor. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, excellent.
Okay.
So I see, first of all, I see uh, Councilor Allen, Madam President, uh, Councilor Peniawa.
Rod,
Yes, Councilor Rudd. Uh, and that's all I can see. Oh, wait. I think that's about it. And of course, myself. So, first of all,
oh, you're
Chief,
looking dandy. I just had to say it. You look great.
I look good.
So good.
I'm trying to keep it together.
You're doing well.
Thank you. The first rule here is we are going to allow the chief to deliver on our request. The second part is to allow the councilors after that to ask any question they want to have or follow-up questions. And then, as like we have done before, we will allow the last 10 minutes for the public to ask any question they may have. And we will have 10 minutes, which will be include asking the question and answering. Chief, uh, Rudd and Councilor Allen, do you want to add anything? No. Okay. Chief, take it away.
Okay. I want to apologize in advance because I thought this meeting was going to be July 27th, but I gathered some stuff and I think I'd be able to get through all this information that you requested. So I know residency was a topic in the consent decree. So Councilor Majuk, I can tackle whatever topic you like first.
So do the consent decree first, and then as we have experienced before, I think the other stuff can wait, and we can, if we run out of time, we can find time for them. But
Okay.
consent decree is the
So,
first.
all right. So the consent decree, it's a complicated topic. There's a lot of intertwined issues, but I think it would be a disservice if I didn't talk about the civil service, the history of the civil service, why the consent decree was put into place, and the things that we've done on the fire department to meet some of the consent decree, and just the history of where we were at before the consent decree, where we were at when the consent decree came into place, and all the things that we have done since then. So some of this, some of you might already know some of this information, but I know Councilor Majuk and I spoke, so I just wanted to kind of go back and do a refresher. So one of the hindrances of the consent decree is it's tied to the civil service. Being able to get applicants that you want in your city, you have to go through the civil service process. So I'll start with that. So way back in 1777, you know, until the modification of the state constitution, basically all civil service positions were implemented with the spoil system, which was using politics as a practice for somebody who won a political office. And they would give their supporters jobs that were currently civil service jobs. They would give those people jobs for supporting them, as opposed to the merit system, which we have in place today. At the time, Albany's Council of Appointment started that process back in 1777. In 1821, a new state constitution was adopted. It removed the power from appointment from the hands of this council, and they gave it solely to the governor. And it required him to have approvals from the state senate to make the appointments to any civil service positions. So that system pretty much stayed in place until 1881. That's when President James Garfield was assassinated by a disgruntled office seeker. He thought he had a job lined up for supporting President Garfield. Before President Garfield died, he brought forth a federal law, which was passed by his successor. And this federal law was the Pendleton Services Reform Act. And that stipulated that government jobs should be awarded based on merit. And it provided government employees with competitive exams based on merit and fitness rather than political affiliation. In 1983, the governor of New York signed off on that bill, and he wanted to make a civil service committee of his own, or a law of his own in New York State. So that there was a civil service law that was put into place. They made a New York State Civil Service Commission in 1883, and pretty much from 1883 to 1889, this system was in place. But it didn't work as many people envisioned it, because there was still a lot of political appointments being made that people thought. So in 1894, there was a constitutional convention held in New York State, and some changes were made to the Constitution that amended Article 5, Section 6 of the Constitution. And basically that said all appointments and promotion in the civil service of the state and all of the civil divisions, including cities and villages, shall be made according to merit and fitness, as far as practical by examination. So as we fast forward, this process was in place. Local municipalities, the state put together municipal service divisions and local exam sections in different counties throughout the state. So that's kind of where we got to, where we led up until right around the time that was when the consent decree was an issue, because I'll get into the consent decree a little bit more. But at the time, the civil service law was what was used to hire all police and fire in the city of Syracuse. So in 1980, there was a couple of different reasons, but the city, they had a desire to achieve greater Black representation on the public safety forces and to comply with federal and state laws. They wanted to protect Black people from racial discrimination. And the fire civil examinations were said to be disproportionately negatively impacting Black applicants. They felt like the tests weren't, the material on the test didn't really provide a good testing application to see if the people were able to do the job as a firefighter. So the issue was, if you don't follow civil service law, and some of the civil service hurdles that were in place at that time, failure to comply with those civil service laws at that time could lead to criminal and civil charges by city officials. And not following this archaic civil service process, the city could suffer substantial funding losses by the federal government. Some of the consent decrees that were put in all across the country and in Syracuse were put in place because of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and other federal laws like the amendment of the Constitution, the 14th Amendment. So in 1980, Lee Alexander, the mayor, and the fire chief and the police chief felt like they didn't have a mechanism to hire Black firefighters or police officers. So they basically sued the civil service, saying that the testing system was hampering them from developing any productive candidates. So after the civil service, I can get into our history from what we've been doing as far as the fire department. So in 1980, that's when the consent decree went into place. So that's where the civil service was, all the way from the beginning of time in New York, all the way to the consent decree. And the only other thing that happened with the civil service process since then, under George Pataki's administration, the way the civil service was tested, the scoring was obtained was, it was point for point. If you scored a 98, you had a 98. If you scored a 96, you had a 96. Under Pataki's administration, they introduced band scoring, which band scoring, if you score between a 95 and a 99, everybody in that group would get a 95. If you score between a 90 and a 95, everybody would get a 90. So they thought at that time that it would provide more applicants instead of just going down the list of the civil service test results. So basically, how this interplays with the city of Syracuse, our fire department, I'm going to touch on our fire department and bring our fire department up to the era of the consent decree. So Our department was established in 1877. Before that, there were eras of unorganized and organized firefighting through civilian firefighting forces. And on August 15th, 1954, the city of Syracuse hired its first black firefighter. His name was Chester Whiteside. This was 77 years after the department was established. After Whiteside, a few minorities slowly started joining the department. In 1973, there were 6 black firefighters on the job. That's about the time when the consent decree came into place. After the consent decree, on June 13th, 1988, the fire department hired its first female firefighter. Her name was Danita Thomas. That was 111 years after the department was established. And not only was Miss Thomas female, she was also a black female. So I have some data here that I'll get into a little bit later. It'll break down the hiring practices from 1979, right before the consent decree happened, right up until Danita Thomas got hired in 1988. In 1994, a group of black firefighters established a group called Firefighters of Color in Syracuse. And these firefighters realized the importance of forming a group to promote and advocate and educate potential candidates. In the years following the organizational focus, working with the chief's office at the time, there was a dramatic increase in the number of black firefighters from underrepresented communities. And at the time, Focus not only worked with the chief's office, they worked with, interested leaders in the community like the Southwest Center, the NAACP, the Urban League, the Dunbar Center, and there's a few of you that are on this call. I know President Hudson, and there's a few people that we've intercrossed before I became the chief, just trying to help this process along. And at the time when I got involved, Van Robinson was the NAACP president, and he was a Syracuse, you guys all know he was a Syracuse Common Council president. And based on all those people working together, they, as an organization, try to work with the city to organize classes on civil service taking. They conducted mock interviews. They even paid for some people's entrance exams if they didn't have the money. With all that effort, through Focus and all the other people contributing with the fire department and people in the community, in 1997, Derek Jackson was promoted to the rank of lieutenant. He was the first minority officer in the history of the Syracuse Fire Department. He was a black gentleman, and his appointment to lieutenant was 120 years after the department was established. After Lieutenant Jackson, many other firefighters who were black quickly followed in his leadership role in the department. So up until that point, the consent decree happened. I can get into the data later if you guys want to talk about that. I'll just keep going forward what we've been doing in the department. So in 2018, when I became the chief, we promoted the first female district chief in the department. The district chief position is one of the most important jobs that we have on the department. They supervise pretty much the whole city, but there's 3 of them on duty at all times. They're usually the first command person to arrive at a fire. They also deal with all the firefighters on a daily basis. So her promotion in 2018 was the 142 years after the department was established. That particular female who became the district chief was also the very first captain when she was promoted to captain. So before 2018, before I became the chief, I believe there were 13 black firefighters who were promoted through the ranks of the promotion using the civil service model. There were also 2 females who were promoted to lieutenant, and 1 female that was promoted to captain, and she's the same person that was promoted to district chief when I became chief. Over the last 2.5 years since I've been the chief, there have been 7 black firefighters who scored high enough to get promoted. Those are in the ranks of district chief, captain, and lieutenant. And like I stated earlier, we have the female district chief. Our current demographics of our whole department right now are, we have 338 firefighters altogether. We have 269 white male firefighters. We have 9 female white firefighters. We have 57 black firefighters. We have 4 female African American firefighters. Within that group of people, just talking about the consent decree and the people that were promoted, there are 9 black officers, like I said, 1 female district chief and 1 female lieutenant at this time. So one of the stipulations in the consent decree, there's a lot of pages in the consent decree, but one of the stipulations in the consent decree was a supplement any affirmative action and recruitment programs to help the consent decree flourish. And I'm going to speak about a lot of the recruiting and efforts that we put into that notion that's in the consent decree. But one of the things that I'm really proud about our department, I think we took it to the next step because we've actually been engaging civil service with the entry level tests that are given throughout the state and the promotional levels since I've been a chief. I'm on this fire advisory committee. It's a New York State Civil Service appointed committee. And what we do on this committee is we go through civil service questions and we make sure that the testing material is adequately corresponding with the job that is being tested for. I've been on the committee for about a year now, a year and a half. And there's room for improvement with that test. We're currently in the process of looking forward and seeing how we can make that test more applicable to the jobs that are actually being done. So that's what we're doing on the promotion front with the civil service test. In 2018, civil service in New York State, and I think it was driven by other cities with other consent decrees that they have in place, like down in Westchester County. There were people that were suing the state, basically the same reason we sued in 1980, and they wanted to change the entry-level civil service firefighter exam. So when I became the chief, we allowed 15 firefighters to take a mock exam. We gave feedback back to the state and try to help them figure out if the testing questions are actually questions that would help somebody become a firefighter. And the experts that give these tests would probably say that these tests, the higher you score on the test, that tells if you have the ability to absorb information that you're going to learn as you're a new firefighter. So we sat through a bunch of different validation processes through this test, and this test was eventually redeveloped, and the state used it for the first time in 2019. And the results were the highest scoring test that we have in recent history, and not only for Black or Hispanic or female candidates, but even all the white candidates. It was a good test to be able to score for everybody because of the new material on there. This particular test, there were 500 people who passed the test. The scores for people that were non-Black were 2 people scored 105. There was 1 Black candidate who scored 105. There were 40 candidates who were not Black that scored 100. There were 10 Black candidates who scored 100. There were 40 candidates who scored 95. Well, there were 119 non-Black candidates who scored a 95. And there were 34 Black candidates who scored a 95. And there were 44 candidates that were Black that scored 90. These test results have been the highest test results that in recent history, like I was saying before. If you compare, I have some data. If you compare there was a test given in 2016 and in 2019. So in 2016, there were 137 Black candidates that were male that took the test. In 2019, and I haven't spoken about it, but we did a huge recruiting campaign that assisted with getting some of these numbers also. But not only recruiting was a key factor, but actually redeveloping that test was a huge part of the successful scores on the people that took the test. So there were 157 Black candidates that were males that scored, which is 20 more people that were Black that scored on this test. There were 6 more Hispanic citizens who took this test in the previous time. The Asian Americans in 2016, there were 2 more than this currently this year. And there was 2 more American Indian gentlemen that took this test compared to 2016. Now, to get into the females, the 2019 test had 10 more candidates than in 2016 total. There were 2 more white candidates, female candidates that took the test. There were actually 6 more black female candidates that took the test. Hispanic numbers were pretty much the same. And the rest of the categories, they don't have any percentages in them. But the people who passed these tests were the highest that we've seen in a long time, like I was saying. And you could see that the work that we did recruiting and the work that we were doing working with the New York State Civil Service kind of paid dividends. So some of the things that we did to get to the point to get people to take the test, and this was going on before I became the chief, and some of the things are going on now that I'm the chief now.
Chief, before you list all the things you've done to make it happen, can you just share in a table the data that you just presented, because it's really hard to like process it in my brain when you read it. You don't have to do it this second, but it just like in the next few days.
I'll send all this data that I have to you. I'll get it all together and I'll send it to you. But I have all the data from the test scores of the last 2 tests that we're giving. I have the breakdown of all the classes that were hired since 1979 that are broken down between white candidates, African American candidates or black candidates, female candidates that are white and black also. And I have that data from 1979 all the way to 2018 of all the people we've hired and the breakdown of those people that were hired. So I'll certainly get that information over to you.
Thank you.
So the information I have is just recruiting information. I can get into that if you guys like. I can talk about what we did, how we did it, if you like, or I can talk about what I do on that fire advisory committee to try to make things different in the future, and I can talk about how we changed over the entrance exam to make it more successful for candidates.
Can I ask a recruiting question?
Yes.
Okay, because I looked at the number of females you have, and there's only like 13 of them in the whole fire department.
Yes.
I mean, is it lack of interest from females? What do you think it is?
I think historically, I think the actual occupation, there was a lack of interest for a lot of other reasons. I think since probably, I've been on the job for 20 years and I've seen a huge interest of females wanting to be firefighters. And some of those firefighters have relationships, either their father or brother, or they have direct relationships with other firefighters. So they see firefighters and they know that they can actually do the job and they want to try to do the job. I think the biggest hurdle is the people who don't have access to even knowing that there are jobs available. Especially.
And that goes back to the question. So, I mean, I know you put on things to recruit for minority officers. Have you ever thought about doing just a recruitment for female firefighters?
Yes, we talked about it. And actually, when we were doing all of our recruiting, we were targeted females. We targeted all the different types of different candidates that we can have that are in our city. And I think when we went out, we actually had people in communication with the certain people, but there was a orientation program that we were going to implement to try to get more females to actually having them take the test isn't really the problem. I think we definitely can use more females that take the test and score higher, because like I was saying, in 2019, we only had 52 females that scored in the test, and only 36 of them, 37, 38, 41 of them passed. So 11 people didn't pass the test. So You have to get them from the point where they take the test, and then after they take the test, they have to be able to still be communicated. And so sometimes this test was given in 2019. We still haven't hired off that list right now because we were going to hire this spring, then COVID came, and we just never hired the class this spring. But when hopefully we can put on a class that we had in the budget around the fall or early January, and we can get in contact with all of these 41 candidates, these female candidates. And then once you get in contact with them, we want to bring them in. We want to bring them over to our training division, and so we can give them a PowerPoint, bring out the equipment, show them the different types of things they're going to be doing, the medical calls, show them the fires that we kind of go to, show them videos. And we have
What's the average cost, Chief?
Of
What's
what?
the average cost for a firefighter training?
For a firefighter to get trained?
Yes.
Or are you talking about in training or?
Because I know when we talk about police, they say for everything involving the police is $100,000. So I want to know what it would cost us for one firefighter.
Oh, for one firefighter, a brand new firefighter, it's $80,000 based on their salary. And if you throw in what the benefits are, that's around $80,000 for the salary, health, insurance, all those types of things.
Thank you.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hudson? Okay. But I think the main thing is like you said, getting the female applicants into our facility and actually showing them what we do. And some of those people would want to still go along and do it. Some of them won't. And then even some of the people, and it's just not females, there are males. There are people that want to be firefighters, but sometimes they don't have all the different tools to become a firefighter. And we try to get as many people as we can and work with them so they can learn and develop the tools. But some people get turned off by the job because it's a very difficult occupation. So. Is there any other questions?
Councilors, anybody else?
What's the threshold for recommended by the consent decree? Are you in compliance with the racial suggestion?
So at the time when the consent decree was put into place, I believe it was a 25% was supposed to be the percentage of the black firefighters on the job. Right now we're around 20%, a little bit under 20%, but we've had a few people retire recently. So in I believe 2010, I believe the labor force of the black community was 29%, if I'm not mistaken. And that's kind of what the consent decree is based on, is what the labor force of the black community in the city was at the time. So right now, if you do all the calculations, we're a little bit under where we should be, but we have 61 total black firefighters and 13 female firefighters at this time.
What year was the consent decree for you? Because why does anybody on the line know why the police threshold is only 10% while the fire, the chief is describing it as 25%?
Well, the difference is, and I'm not sure for the entry level for the police, but the entry level for the firefighters, so when the consent decree has stipulated that the goal of the consent decree was to get an entry level of 25% when you hire a class. And then once you get the classes hired, the goal was to get 10% of black applicants, or you want to promote each rank, you want to have 10% black candidates through the rank. So you want to have 25% of your firefighters to be black firefighters. You want to have 10% of your lieutenants, and our structure is a little different from the police, but it's a lieutenant, captain, district chief, deputy chief, and then it's me and the first deputy chief. But the goal in the consent decree was to have 10% lieutenants, 10% captains, 10% district chiefs, and 10% deputies. We probably have 68 lieutenants right now, approximately on the job right now. And I got those numbers, but there's approximately, I don't think we're meeting all those numbers with the percentages through the ranks, but that 10% that you mentioned, Councilor Rudd, is for going through the ranks. The 25% is to put those people at firefighter entry-level positions. I don't know if there's anybody else that has a comment on that, but that's how I interpreted the consent decree, and that's what I've known since I've been on the job. Was that was a goal of the consent decree. And I think for the females, the goal was to utilize female in all ranks within the fire department in numbers approximating their interests and their ability to qualify for such positions. So if you go through the consent decree, there wasn't really any percentages that were put with the females, but they were put with the Black candidates. But the consent decree does say that a Black female will constitute, according to the consent decree, a position for a Black firefighter and a female firefighter. So that's how it was written in 1980. Does that make sense, Councilor Rudd, to my explanation? Or
yes, I think it makes sense.
Okay.
So in other words, you get like a 2-for-1 in that case.
I guess you could say that. I mean, you can hire a female off the list that's a Black female, and she would count towards hiring a female, and then as a Black candidate at the same time. And so I got to look to see if, I know that's how it's written. I got to look to see how it's interpreted, or maybe somebody.
Let me help you a little bit on this one. I think on the consent decree, on the interim basis, it's set at 5% for Blacks on both the fire and the police. That's on the interim level. And then for the female, especially on the police part, it's 20%. So that's what the consent decree says.
Can you say that again, Counselor? I couldn't hear the last sentence.
What I see from what the consent decree say is that on the interim basis, to achieve it required that the police and the fire get the 25% on entry level for both of them. 25%.
25, right? Correct.
25% on entry level.
Yes.
The police just 2 weeks ago say the threshold was 10% across the board.
They say it was 10%, but it's actually 25%.
You tell me the police department told me the wrong threshold for the consent decree 2 weeks ago? I just don't.
But I think they tried to lowball, because the way I'm hearing it is 25 going in, but then it's 10 in all the other areas.
Yep, in the leadership level. Yeah.
It's this is Kristen. It's the way we've interpreted it. It's 25% hiring to try to. The idea was, if the levels were so low at that time, you needed a higher percentage in order to get the rest of the department up to that 10%. So 25% hiring to reach an overall population of 10% for both police and fire. And as far as female firefighters and officers, what the consent decree said was the party should sit down and come up with what that number should be. And I do not believe that follow-up happened.
Okay, so as the Corp Council, do you intend to see that happen? Because I think that's very off base, that from a consent decree in 1970 or whatever, that we have women, which are primarily the households these days, and there's no number attached to us. We're just, oh, well, if you hire women, you just do. There should be a number attached.
There is number, Madam President. It's at 20%.
Well,
on the hiring, 20%.
Because Chief Miles just said there was no number attached.
Oh, the consent decree say that it's 20% hiring for women, entry level.
I read this consent decree 100 times, but I'm no lawyer, and when you read the consent decree, especially the copies that I read through, and I'll defer to Kristen on this, but from what I know and from what's been happening, which isn't a direct reflection of why females have not been hired, but I believe it said the consent decree shall utilize female in all ranks within the fire department in numbers approximating their interest and their ability to qualify for such positions. I've never seen a number tied to the females, but I could be totally missing that in this document, but I've never seen the percentage of females. And it just says that the 10% goal for promotion of African Americans in the fire department was to have an attainable advancement for the black candidates once the 25% goal was met. But that's kind of how we've been, and I believe the police have been interpreting this. But like I said, I'll defer to Kristen, but I don't remember laying eyes on a percentage for the women in this document.
Yeah, Chief, you just read the language accurately. It talks about numbers approximating their interest in and ability to qualify for such positions. And then it says the parties shall negotiate, meaning the city and the department, the court and the State Civil Service Commission back in 1981 were supposed to negotiate long-term and interim goals for females within 18 months of that decree. And I don't have a record of that happening back in the early 80s. And
Kristen, just one last clarification question, because it seemed like Chief Mons was describing almost like not being in compliance because he's not at 25%, but the police were describing not being in compliance because they're at 8.9% instead of 10%. So is the fire department actually in compliance because they did fulfill enough that they crossed the 10% threshold, or are they not in compliance because their goal is 25% overall? You know what I'm saying? Like, and then in relation to that, does that mean that police, the threshold is supposed to be 25 for them as well and not 10, like they cited 2 weeks ago?
The number that was, again, so that it was 25% for hires back then to try to get the overall numbers at 10%. There was litigation involving the fire department and the consent decree. I don't have a year off the top of my head. It was
2012.
After
2004. 2004, Kristen.
2004. Okay. And it involved the fire department, and the issue was, is that number still 10%, or is it in numbers reflecting the population? So if 35, whatever the number is, 45% of the residents of Syracuse are African American, should that be the representation in the departments? And a court back then said yes, it should represent the population. So what the court said is that 10% was the goal back then, but it's a living goal, and that the bar is actually much higher now.
So I think, Kristen, here I think it's important that we be clear that at the entry level, yes, it's 25%, and I think what Chief is saying and should be saying, and what we are asking is that both at the 25%, which based on the numbers that the Chief has presented, we're only at close to 17%, just a little bit below 17%. So if you look at the entry level or the lower level, that's where it should be at 25%, but currently we are at almost 17%.
Yeah.
Based on the numbers that the Chief has just given. Now, what I'm not clear about is the 10% of the ranking, in which we. And I know years ago we were around 11%, but currently, what is that like, Chief?
Can you say that? Can you ask the last bit of your question for me?
So I know that the 25%, we are not meeting that.
Yep.
These are the numbers you gave.
Yep.
Okay. That's on the entry level. What about at the ranking?
So through the ranks. So through the ranks, I'd have to get that specific information, but I can tell you there's probably one rank that we meet that parameter on, and that would be the deputy chief level, because there's only 5 deputy chiefs, and one of those deputy chiefs is a black deputy chief. We have 14 district chiefs, and we have one black district chief, but we also have one female district chief. But captains, we have 20 captains. There's only there's one Hispanic and 2 black captains, and the lieutenants right now, I believe we have. I mean, I can count them on my fingers, so it's not 10%.
So are you between the lieutenants, captains, the chief? What's their total? All is it?
How many total people is that?
How many? All of them? Yes, because that is what we should draw 10% for.
Yeah. So hold on for 1 second. So I think that's approximately, we have 10. And if you throw me in there, it's 11. I don't know if you want to use me because I'm in a point position. So 10 out of probably, hold on for 1 second. Ten out of 10. So we're missing that by a little bit. But
I couldn't hear you. What's the number? 10 out of.
We have 10 black officers out of 110 total. But we also have 1 white female district chief and 1 white female lieutenant. So, but if you look,
so it's close.
It's close.
8 or 9, right? Okay.
Yeah. And those female district chiefs, the female district chief and the female lieutenant, according to the consent decree, because there's no numbers that are affiliated with those, I don't know if you want to add those into them or how you interpret this, the language. But so we also have, so we have 9 black officers, 2 female supervisors, and that's what we have right now.
Okay. Now with all of that, and Hispanics in that 110.
We have 1. Oh, in the 110, we got 1 Hispanic captain.
So I guess we need to do better on that, right?
Yep. Then there's always room for improvement, but there's a lot of different things that come into play. We, like I said, the recruiting is a huge part. The civil service is another huge hurdle, but actually coming in, being able to get through training and doing some of the things that we have to do as firefighters. Not everybody we're going to recruit is going to be able to do the job. I mean, as much as we would want them to. So that's a huge part of our recruiting effort, is trying to make sure that they understand what they're getting into, so they can be around for a long time. But we have a lot of people that are interested, but I think certain issues come up with the process as far as them being able to do the job, the physical part, wanting to deal with the mental part of seeing people pulled out of fires, or you go to situations when people are having their worst day, and during training, and if we're doing an orientation program, we try to simulate that to let them know, because the last thing we want to do is give somebody the false sense of what this job is, hire them, get them halfway through training, and then they quit because it's just too much physically or emotional for them to do this job. But that's the hurdle. I think that's the biggest hurdle. And I know the police have hurdles with their police officers, and we have our hurdles with the firefighters, because I mean, there's a lot of people that look at what we do and it looks like, hey, I can do that. But until you're that person that has to run into a burning building when everybody's running out, that's when a lot of minds might change. And I think there's a lot of people out there that we should still be trying to recruit to bring in that could actually do a great job. And that's the challenge as the chief, and putting a team together to actually go out and recruit. But one of the things, especially now with the budget, uncertainty of the budget and things like that, my staff, I I don't have much staff with me now. Until we get some clarification on where we're going over the next 6 to 8 months, all the staff that I had working with me, they're all on fire trucks right now. So the budget is a concern when you're thinking about implementing all these robust trainings and having recruiters and doing all these orientation programs. Because I can speak about a lot of stuff that I did, and there's other firemen and firefighters that did a lot of recruiting. And before I became the chief, most of the things I did, I volunteered for. And there are probably some people that will still volunteer, but when you're trying to do it from an administrative level, it costs money to actually put together a nice, robust system to talk about all the things that we're talking. And even things that we're not talking about, it costs money. So there's a balance of making sure our fire trucks are staffed, that they're in the neighborhoods responding to calls. There's a lot of other administrative work that we have to do, but finding the avenue to get some of these desires filled, it's a challenge. And I think we've done a good job trying to get that with what we're giving.
I wanna be fair to other councilors. Councilor Rudd, Councilor Allen, I don't know who else is here. Madam President asked already. I don't know if she has a follow-up. Any further questions?
Can I, Councilor Joe, I just wanted to jump in on one point that you made about the lack of Hispanic firefighters. I just wanted to point out, this might be obvious, but one of the key tools that the consent decree affords the department is in the civil service process. Under the decree, Black applicants are able to be granted preference in that you have to take the top applicants off a list. There's a separate list for Black applicants so that there's a preference given in the civil service process. That's the whole heart of the consent decree. The consent decree does not cover Hispanic applicants. So those applicants are in the same list as white applicants or those of other races. And so I just wanted to point out that, we don't have the same tool available to us through the civil service process that we do for Black applicants and for female applicants as well. I just wanted to clarify that.
So, Kristen, and thank you for clarifying that. And we do see that there is a need here to at least have Hispanic population be represented in the department. Now, what can we do here to make sure that happens from your legal perspective?
Well, in terms of the civil service law, we don't have the ability as a city to make changes to that process or to sort of impose our own consent decree type rule. So unless we had the support of some other, state or federal government partners to impose that, it really has to be a court that imposes it, like they did in this case in 1980. And just let me take this opportunity to point out, and it's been pointed out before, but we're on topic, where the U.S. Department of Justice has taken the position that we've met, from in their perspective, we're good here in Syracuse, and we're seeking to dissolve this consent decree entirely. And we've opposed that because it's an important tool in order to, we're not there yet in police or fire in terms of the racial makeup and the gender makeup of the departments. Some would say, well, you've had 40 years with this decree, so it's obviously not helping. But I would say that without this decree, the numbers would probably be worse. And so, it's interesting to note, though, that the Department of Justice wanted to do away with the consent decree. But in terms of, getting that additional ability to work around civil service for other groups, there's not a way for us to do that at a local level.
Okay, so Chief, with this being said, with the applicant that have taken the test, is there a way to differentiate one that we had to use the decree around versus the one that actually took the test and came out on top? Is there a way to see the percentage of how we use the decree over not? Can you get it, Chief?
I have all the data of all the black candidates that we had that took the test, that passed the test, and then from 2019, well, we can go back to 2016. We can look at there's a test given in 2016, and there's data that shows how many people took the test, how many people passed the test, and then how many people actually were hired. Now, when Kristen was talking, one of the things I was going to chime in is some of these numbers are higher they were at one point. Like at some point, there are people that actually that I hired since I've been the chief. We've only hired one class since I've been the chief, but we had one candidate who, once he was going through training, realized this type of work didn't suit him well. So, he resigned. We had another person that of color, a black gentleman, or he was an Hispanic gentleman. He was claustrophobic with his face mask, which is a critical part of our job, being able to wear your face mask. And we worked tirelessly with him to try to get him over the hump. But we only have 16 weeks to prepare the firefighters to go out and do the real thing on the front lines. So 2 of those firefighters in the last class didn't make it out of training. And then we had one candidate, and I grew up with this other candidate. I know his family very well. We got pretty much to the end of his probation, and he called me and said, "This isn't for me." And I told him to take some time to think about it because he had come so long and his probation period was up. But I thought I admired his heart, because it's easy just to keep doing something when you have a paycheck coming in, and he realized his job wasn't for him. So those numbers easily get skewed when there's only 70, 72 people that are black or females. And so the numbers, we actually do hire more. Some of them just can't sustain the job, for whatever reasons. And it's not just with black candidates, it's also with white candidates and female candidates. We can put the race or the gender on this, but this profession is a tough profession, and not everybody makes it out. So I understand your question, but I just wanted to make that point, that the hiring is there. Whether they can stay through the whole process of getting a whole career under their belt is another story, because of a lot of reasons.
Okay, is there a way you can break that down? Because what I'm trying to understand, Chief, is statistically, what number or what percentage do we have to use the consent decree to push them through, and out of those numbers, what came through merit? See what I'm saying?
Yep.
Those that took the test and actually score high did not need consent decree. And then you see what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying.
So out of the 137 that took the test, maybe 10 got hired. 10. How many you had to use a consent decree, and those that did not need consent decree?
So
and just send us that number.
Okay, I will do that. The issue with your question, that do you mind if I just hop on that question that you just said, or you?
We got send that to us in writing. We got 7 minutes left, and we had promised the public that we were going to give them 10 minutes. I apologize for anybody from public. We took your 3 minutes away. I want to stay on this. So Jim or Amanda, if you see that out of the list, if any of the public have raised any question, let us know.
And Counselor, I'll stay on and answer however many questions everybody has. So I'm here for if anybody wants to ask me questions. Just okay.
Jim, can you hear me?
Yeah, I guess if you could just have anyone that is on that has a question to hit the chat button and message me, and I'll tell them that they're ready to speak. But right now, I don't have any messages.
Okay. So we are going to wait. Just keep an eye on it, and we are going to continue once you see something being raised by a public. Please alert me.
Okay.
All right. So Chief, go ahead. Continue with the question I just asked.
I lost my train of thought. Oh, to your question, so you were asking, if a black candidate scores high, why do we have to use it the consent decree to hire them. Was that kind of your question?
No, my question is, out of the black and women that were hired,
Yes.
how many of them did we had to use a consent decree on, and how many of them went on and got hired through their own merits, through successfully scoring higher?
All right, I will look at that. And like I said, the issue in the past was there was a lot of black candidates who didn't really score high. You might have, like, even this test right now. I gotta find that paperwork. Even this test right now. So there's 3 candidates who scored 105 of the test that we're waiting to hire off of. One of them is black, 2 of them are white or non-black candidates. As you get down to the hundreds, 40 people are, like I was saying earlier, they're non-black candidates. 10 of those, 10 of the people that scored 100 are black candidates. So depending on their test score, in the past, there hasn't been a large enough volume of black candidates who scored high enough that most people that got hired that were black got hired off of the consent decree because the scoring wasn't high enough. Typically, now there were candidates who scored at 195. Now, whether they were used with the consent decree, I would have to go back and look. I actually have some of that data here. I'm not sure if I can give it to you now, but I'll email it all to you what I have.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the hurdle, was getting more people, females, black people, that are actually taking the test to actually score higher. And that's why we did, we reformed the entry level exam to get some of these higher test scores, because these higher test scores were never the case. And that was always the issue, where you had to almost go over to the consent decree to hire 80 candidates that were black for the most part. But there are black candidates who score 100, but you have to score 100, you have to ace, go through the interview process, and you have to check all the boxes going through the whole process, which is hard when you only have 1 or 2 of those candidates. And so that makes you have to go to the blacklist. That's what it's called under the consent decree. There's a list that is generally called the blacklist, and you put on there. And then particularly this last class, some of the candidates that we hired off the 2016 test for the 2018 class that I hired, we were all the way down to the 75 test scores. The white candidates were probably up around the 85s, but there weren't enough black candidates who scored high enough to get hired off the regular list. Do you understand what I'm saying? So
maybe, Chief, what we can do is provide just the test scores of those hired off the last couple classes. And, I think that indirectly would answer your question.
Yeah, but wouldn't that interfere with privacy issues at all?
No, I can I'll send that. It's all public information, the test scores, and
they wouldn't share the name. They'd be de-identified, wouldn't they?
Yeah, no, it's just, I got statistics of all the males, white, black, Hispanic, Asian American, Indian.
Yeah.
The same thing with females, and I can get you all that information. And I have information on all the people we've hired, basically females, black candidates, and white candidates.
But yeah, we can absolutely provide the test scores, and I think that answers the question.
Okay. So with like the police, Chief, one of the things that we heard from the police department was that there are enough candidates that apply and take the test, but the biggest hurdle for candidates becoming officers is the background checks. Is that the same thing with the fire here, or no?
We definitely had some people that didn't pass a background check, but I would say there's definitely been people who have been eliminated with background checks, and most of those are people that might have had a felony, or if they had any crimes, or they had anything on their record that was affiliated with arsons or anything with opposes our mission as a fire department. All those people get considered. They don't get ruled out, but it's people who don't have those certain types of things in their background check that really dismisses them. There are people that get hired and they have certain things in their background. I'm not against hiring people with things in their background, and it's not anything negative towards those people. But when you have a candidate that has a couple of things in their background, and then a candidate who has nothing, and they bring the same thing to the table, it's up to at some point, there's a consideration probably given to the person who might not have a record, but it all depends on the cards kind of play themselves. It all depends on who the person is, how they're interviewing, all the things they're bringing to the table. Can they explain some of the things that happened in their past that might be on their background check? I think we have a pretty great system of when we bring the candidates in, we go through them pretty thoroughly. And to your point, there are people who don't make it through because of the background checks. I don't think it's a huge number compared to the biggest reason why the people that score don't move forward.
Okay.
Sometimes.
What do you think? What do you think is the biggest barrier here, or hurdle that has to be overcome besides background check that you think is the problem?
I think the biggest hurdle is if you're talking about hiring more black candidates and female candidates. You know, the white males that took the test in 2016, there are 352 people to choose from. If you had 352 black candidates and then 352 female candidates, I'm pretty sure you can do a good job of assembling a great class of people, because the more people you have to choose from, to interview, to put through the different processes to get a good candidate, to me, the biggest issue is the volume of candidates we have in all these different desired classes that we want to try to expand employment to. If you had 500 candidates in all these different categories, I think you'd be able to, it'll take a long interview process, but you'd be able to pick great candidates, and I don't think we'd be having these discussions as much as we are.
So just listening from you, Chief, you said earlier, from as you narrate nicely and overview the history of your department, since there was an increase in the number of blacks in the department, especially the first one in 19, was it 19? The first rank, the first 1997, right?
The first
rank.
Yeah, 1997.
1997. So from when I was listening to you, what I took from you was, when there is more minorities on the force, not only does that the interest increase, but the number of recruits also increase, right?
That
when there are good mechanisms in place that promote recruitment and promote the job of firefighters in the community, it allows more interest in the community. Did I not hear that correctly?
I think it's helpful. I think you can have a force full of black candidates, and there could be a lot of citizens in the community that see these black candidates, and they could want to be just like them from what they're seeing them doing. But if they don't have access to the process and how to take the test, how to study for the test, how to pay for the test, how to get through civil service, they can see the black candidates all they want. But the bigger issue, the biggest thing we can do is identify a large group of candidates and reach out to them and show them how to get through the process. Because you can see it all you want, but you have to know how to get yourself ready to be in that position. It's kind of like an athlete that wants to play with the New York Giants. I can want to go play with the Giants all I want, but somebody needs to show me how to get my speed together, how to catch the ball, how to get all those things together so I can become a professional football player. But just seeing it definitely is a thing that triggers interest. But I think the bigger connection is having groups like I spoke of before, Focus, or having groups that are coming out of my office, going out, reaching out to those people and giving them, we've given them like a blueprint on what you need to do to be able to prepare for the test, take the test, and then after you take the test, explain to them what the job is. And it's a long process. I mean, what you brought up is a good point, but it's a small factor in getting those people from seeing a black firefighter to getting them hired and on the job. You know.
So, and where I was trying to go with that, Chief, I think to be able to increase numbers, whether it's black, white, or any other color, I think people need to see people that look like themselves in any field. For them, that is not the all answer, but it's a more likely answer that if I see a firefighter that look like me, it's gonna increase my interest more than it should, right? It's gonna increase my interest is going to go up, right? So in a sense here, Chief, where I'm trying to go with this, Chief, I think increasing this number has a lot to do with the leadership ability to have the will to want to do it. Yep. Is that a correct place to put it?
I believe it's a huge part about it. Having a chief that encourages diversity, reaching out to pockets of the neighborhoods that might not see or might not understand how to become a public servant. I think it definitely is as a fire chief, and it's a little bit different because, like I said, when I got hired, I was recruited by the members of Focus. I didn't know anything about the fire department. I don't know if you've heard this before, but when I got hired, I lived across the street from fire stations my whole life. I never once looked over at the fire station and asked myself, what's behind that door? Not until there were some other firefighters that came around and they offered to pay for my test. I took the test. I scored pretty well. I got hired. And when I got on, it was, they're definitely, you know, in any occupations, when you come on and you're the minority on the job, you have a lot of things you have to learn how to do, how to assimilate to what's going on. But when I made it out of training, I always told myself, I'm going to help people that were like me, that grew up in neighborhoods like me, whether they were white, black, whatever their orientation was. That was what I always have been doing before I became a chief. And what I realized was there was a little bit of separation when I came on. You had black firefighters that wanted more black firefighters. You might have had other people that were fine with the amount of black firefighters that were on the job. But until everybody's working together, the black firefighters can't do it on their own. I can't do it on my own. There needs to be a concerted effort from the firefighters, the people in the community, the council, you know, like you, Councilor Majuk. I think having everybody working together to figure out who are the people that we want to identify to give this information to and then help them to be able to score high in these. If you don't score high in the civil service test, all the things we're talking about, they don't matter. I mean, you're not going to get a shot. You know, if you could want to be a firefighter, I can go out and I can go shake everybody's hand in the community. I can give them all the stuff. But if they don't score high in the test, according to the civil service rules, our hands are tied. Even with the consent decree, there's still, you have to go down the consent decree as the list of black candidates a certain way. You can only go down the top 3 scores. And until you get people to be able to understand how to take the test and to score well on those tests, that is what the focus should be on. And one of the things that I'm doing right now, starting in the school year next year, and I didn't touch on it because we got kind of cut off, but we're starting a program at PSLA Fowler, and in that program, we're going to be teaching the kids some curriculum that our academy recruits get. So when they get through high school, hopefully they'll have some certifications, but we're also going to be teaching them civil service testing techniques. We're going to be giving them OSHA 10 classes. So you have to be able to give them the information they need to do well. And that is something that the chief should be doing. And before I became the chief, I would come up here and talk to whoever the chief was and see how you can get to it. And as a chief, you have to make sure you're trying to do the same things I was doing before and keep the fire department safe. Because, like I said before, there's not many departments in the state that have 45 people who have died doing their job. We have a plaque that's sitting behind me. There's 45 firefighters that came into work and they died talking about the same things we're talking about, doing their job. And that's my ultimate goal, is to make sure our department's safe, and how we bring diversity in and make sure that it fits with all the things of our mission to keep everybody safe. I think we've been doing a decent job with the resources that we have, but I'll be the first to admit there's always room for improvement. And, you know, we talked about the new Americans in our community, that I don't think there was ever a concerted effort. You and I talked before you became a counselor and when I first became the chief, but I mean, until you send people out, identify the people that you want to try to recruit, give them the information, show them how to study, show them what they need to do to be a firefighter. That's the path to do it, and having the resources for my office to do it is a challenge that I got to keep working on.
Well, Councilor Rudd, thank you, Chief. Councilor Rudd and Councilor Allen, and anything else? No. Okay. Chief, I want to thank you for coming here and giving out the information, and we want to thank you for your continual leadership here and continue to push down the barriers. So I appreciate you, and thank you, everyone. Kristen, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right. If nothing else, that will conclude our committee meeting. Thank you very much for coming. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.